Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Dave from Military to Millionaire. Just got done recording an episode with Nick Breffitt, a Air Force pilot, gone reserves, does spec homes and flipping houses. Super cool episode. I learned a little bit about spec homes. I think you will too. And he gives some really good advice. So if you're new to the show, thanks for joining us. If not, welcome back. Show notes are found at FromMilitaryToMillionaire.com/podcast. Now relax and enjoy the show.
You're listening to the Military Millionaire Podcast, a show about real estate investing for the working class. Stay tuned as we explore ways to help you improve your finances, build wealth through real estate, and become a person that is worth knowing.
Hey guys, on this podcast we talk a lot about the roadblock to success for military members in getting started in real estate investing. For many of us, the barriers of time, location, and not having the right knowledge keep us from building wealth while serving our country. Well, let me tell you about Storehouse 310 Ventures. They get it. Storehouse 310 Ventures is owned by two active duty naval officers that love to make investing fun, lucrative, and have a passion for education, theirs and yours alike. They offer full turnkey rental properties in a market where the numbers make sense, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Yes, Milwaukee, home to the almost 2018 division-titled Milwaukee Brewers, the well-known Miller Brewing Company, and a lot of delicious cheese. Storehouse 310's properties are fully renovated, leased, and have property management in place. Through their rigorous analysis and selection process, they do everything possible to ensure each rental property meets their high standards and offers fantastic returns. Storehouse 310s allows you to invest with confidence while you are living out of state. They have a network of lenders, insurance companies, contractors, a title company, and much more to serve you all along the way. There is absolutely no reason not to get started when you have the right teams and system in place. David and Stu, the owners of Storehouse 310, have been investing themselves for over 15 years. They are on a mission to help as many active duty, reserves, and military veterans create financial freedom through the power of real estate investing. They are honest, transparent, and they prioritize service and giving. They have even committed to give the first 10% of their profits to partner nonprofit organizations that support veteran causes. For more information about their program, send an email to podcast@storehouse310turnkey.com. Again, that is podcast@storehouse310turnkey.com. Tell David and Stu you heard about them through the Military Millionaire Podcast, and they will get you going down the right path. Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Dave from Military to Millionaire, and I'm here with Nick Breffitt, who was he did 13 years in the Air Force as a fighter pilot, and has gotten out and done some spec homes, some house flipping, and just having some fun out in Florida. So, just wanted to welcome him to the show. And Nick, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, Dave. Thanks for that, and first of all, thanks for what you do, man. I think it's really awesome that you're putting yourself out there to help out all these military guys, to let them know exactly what is available to them as they transition out, or not even as they transition out, while they're in the military, and then later on when they inevitably do get out of the military, everything that they can do. So I really appreciate you doing that. But for me, like Dave said, or like you said there, Dave, I'm an Air Force guy. I graduated from the Air Force Academy in 2003. I went to pilot training and then and flew fighters with the Air Force for 13 years. I was all over the States. My first assignment was at Eglin Air Force Base in the Panhandle of Florida. Then I went to be I was an ALO working with the Army for about 3 years, and I went to stationed at Fort Hood. Lived in Georgetown for a bit, which is just north of Austin, and then after that I went to Kadena Air Base in Japan, which is on the island of Okinawa there, and I finished out my active duty Air Force career there, flying F-15s again. So at the end of the assignment in Japan, I was coming up on the end of my commitment, which is 10 years after pilot training. And so I was coming up on the end of that, and just ask myself, like, hey, do I want to stay in the military and do this, potentially get a 1-year unaccompanied tour to Korea or something like that, be separated, keep moving with the family, or do I want to get out and start something new? So it took a lot of soul searching, a lot of talks with my wife, and we decided to get out and start a business. There were some other things that I could have done as well. Being a pilot, I could always go to the airlines, of course. But again, it's not something I really wanted to do. We kind of, well, so back this up a bit. I kind of grew up in the real estate business. My dad's a GC, and so I would go to different jobs with him all the time and do some work and just learn a bunch with him. And moving on a little bit, so we bought our first house when we moved to Eglin at my first assignment there, and that was right at the height of the market. So the end of 2006 is when we bought that house.
Perfect timing.
Perfect timing, right? So at the end of that assignment in 09, when we were looking to move, we could either sell the house and I could come to closing with about 50 grand, which I didn't have at the time, or I could keep it and rent it. And we were lucky enough that it is a great area for that type of home, or for that type of investment. So we have Eglin right there, got Duke Fields right there as well, and then Hurlburt, all in that same area. So there's a ton of people that are always moving in and out of there. So luckily we never had a problem renting that home. So we had that house when we moved to Georgetown in Texas. There we bought a home. It was a foreclosure. It was actually in great shape. So we got into that house. We fixed it up a bit, and we lived in that for 3 years. And then at the end of that assignment, again, we're looking to move to Japan, and we decided to keep that house and rent it out as well. And of course, in Japan, we didn't buy anything there, so we just lived on base. But during this whole time, and this is kind of what I really want to talk about is I got married right out of the academy, and a kind of funny story. Before we got married, my wife's asking me, so how much are you going to make as a lieutenant? I'm like, oh, about $3,000, $3,200, something like that, and she's like, okay, great. And of course, when I graduate, we get married, we move out, we move to a place, and I had my first assignment there for pilot training, paying all the bills. And after all the bills are paid, she's like, so where's all this money you said you were making? I'm like, well, it's in all these bills. So she kind of took that and said, well, I think I'm going to start working just so we can have a little bit of extra cash, and she's super smart. And she took that and said, okay, so what can I do that's going to be competitive everywhere, wherever we go. And she took a look, and she went to nursing school, actually, while I was at pilot training. And it took her about a year, which is about as long as pilot training is. And she came out with her nursing degree, which was awesome.
Yeah.
And so when we moved to Texas, that's all she did. She worked at different hospitals and different clinics or whatever, and just to help supplement our income. After a little bit, she got tired of doing that, just being on her feet, and she decided to open up her own business of doing beach weddings down over here in the Panhandle area, near Panama City and the Destin area of Florida. And she's been doing that ever since, and that's been about 14 years now that she's been in that business, and she's super great at it. And there have been years where she's made more money than I have, which is super great. And I'm super proud of her for doing that. But like, so I say all that because what I was able to do, or what we were able to do, is with my income, I'm paying off all the bills, like the house, the cell phones, the cars, all that stuff, and maybe going out some entertainment. But almost all of the money that she made in her business, we used as investment money. And so we would go and we'd buy a rental somewhere, fix it up and rent it out. And so we did that for years and years until we got to towards the end of the assignment at Kadena, and so at the end of that assignment, when I decided to get out, decided to start a business in real estate, but we need some capital for that, right? And so what we ended up doing was liquidating most of the properties that we had to pull all that cash out and so that we can invest into my business. And so once I got out, started the business. The business was mainly building spec homes to start, and a spec home is just for your listeners out there. You basically have two types of homes that you build or a contractor builds, one for an owner or one that's a spec or speculation. So if you're building for an owner, somebody comes to you and says, hey, I'd like you to build me a house, and you go under contract and they get all the money for you. And at the end, once you get that certificate of occupancy, then you hand over the house to the new owner. When you're building a spec home, it's a little bit different, a little bit more risky, I would say. But what you're doing is, as a contractor, I'm going in, I'm finding a lot, I am designing a house, and I build it with my own money or money that I find with other investors. And then once I get the certificate of occupancy, then I throw it on the market for sale, and then hope I get a buyer. But that's spec home. So I started doing that, and then Dave, I was telling you earlier, but the market right now is really good for contractors, pretty much for everybody. But what that means is that the cost of land is also going up, and so when we were looking at new properties, it was just getting tougher and tougher to make an offer and build a home over that 6 months and make anywhere more than 10 or 20 grand, and over that 6 months, that's kind of hard to do. A little bit riskier. It doesn't give a lot of room for the market to change or the price of the homes to go down or anything like that. So we decided to move on at that point to go to and start doing some flips, and we've been doing that ever since.
That's cool. It teaches me to tell you what my first question is going to be. You went ahead and answered it already. I told him right before we started recording, I was like, I'll make sure that I ask as soon as you're done telling your story, more about spec. I know it's not a very common investment strategy. And you already answered that question, so now I got to figure it out. Okay, so you did some spec homes. I like the fact that you mentioned that, you guys were able to save essentially half your income, which is huge. That's something that, well, hopefully we'll be able to do here in San Diego. We were doing it in Hawaii, but when you move, your finances get thrown up in the air for a month or two. So I'm waiting on it all to settle and all my new allowances to come to fruition, so I know what I'm actually making here. But that's a huge, huge force multiplier when you can put an entire income salary, whether it's salary or even if it's just $1, an hourly wage, a couple bucks here and there. I mean, it adds up quickly. And then you basically went all in. You burned the ships. You got out of the military, sold everything you owned asset-wise, and jumped in on spec homes and then house flipping. And it sounds like you're doing quite well with the house flipping. You did well in spec homes. I'd be curious to hear. So I know, they're both active sources of income, right? Both flipping and spec homes. And assuming the margins were all right, I'd be curious to hear which you would prefer to do and why. Was one more fun? Was one more profitable? What are some of the pros and cons between the two that you've dabbled with?
That's a good question. I like doing both. Both are a lot of fun, and both absolutely have their challenges, right? What would I prefer? If all else being equal, the money's all the same, everything, I think I would prefer doing flips. The reason for that is because I love intrinsically, I love going into a neighborhood and seeing this huge eyesore, that all the neighbors are passing by going, man, they need to tear that down. And I love going in there and fixing it. And then once everything is all done, watching people go in for an open house and going, wow, this is great. This is fantastic. and even beyond that, when somebody does finally buy that property, that they go in there and they're living in that house, and they're building a life for themselves in something that I created, basically. And so I love doing that. And and spec home, building homes is almost the same thing. I mean, you're taking an empty lot with a bunch of trees or bushes or whatever, and you're building a house on it. And the same thing, somebody's going to live in that and build life, and have kids and make a family and all that. And that to me is really, really cool. So
house flipping is also insta sexy. Everybody likes to post before and after pictures of their flip and pretend that the whole middle part was just wonderful. I got a picture yesterday. I got a buddy. So I won't shout out the name, but bought a house the other day, flipping a house in Oahu, and he posted a picture today, and it was a hoarder house, obviously, but a full 40-foot dumpster, totally filled to the brim. He's owned this thing for like 2 days, and then like no room to walk in the yard around it, and hallways still packed, still stacked like chest high. And he was like, "Yep, gonna need another dumpster." And like, holy smokes! Like, it looked bad, but it did not look that bad. And so I've had some not as fun experiences and some fun experience with flips and stuff. So it's definitely challenging, but I definitely, as much as everyone jokes about the before and after pictures, I really think that is fun to see, a house that's 60, 70, 100 years old crumbling, that someone already lived a full life in, and to turn it into something else that somebody else gets to live a full life in, which is just really cool.
Yeah, I agree totally. And the other thing I was thinking about as well with the flips is the time frame that goes along with it, right? So when you're doing a spec home and you buy a property, you're spending 1 to 2 months on plans, getting it engineered, and everybody's busy right now. So you hand a packet to an engineer, and he goes, "All right, it's going to be 4 to 6 weeks," and then you're just you're taking all this time, and once you finally start, then even then it's 4 to 6 months, depending on the size of the home, until you're starting. But with the flip, I mean, you can walk in there and demo it in a few days. I mean, you can get it down to the stud if you need to, even, and then build it back up in a matter of a month or two. And one good thing that does for you. So today's August 14th for all your listeners, but today was a really bad day in the markets, right? And so that's one thing we always like to take a look at. But if you're doing a spec home, that time frame is always much shorter, and it doesn't allow the market to go absolutely nuts, while you're doing that. Versus a spec home, if you're taking 6 months and you hit like right at the front end of a market crash or something, then you might be losing some money. And I think that's how people got into trouble in that last market downturn as well.
Yeah, there were definitely some builders that lost their shirts. In fact, I was talking to someone on the show a couple weeks ago, and essentially that's how she started. She got in with some builders and some developers and this, that, the other, and watched them all burn. Like, she was in it for, I think it was like less than 6 months when the market just started going south, and all these guys got caught just we're halfway through a development, and now what? Which is rough. So I think that's another, the time issue, I think, is, I would imagine that, I wouldn't say, I don't know though. I would be curious on the scalability, right? Because these guys who build entire neighborhoods, and the full development subdivision, I would imagine that once you get to that level, it's almost faster to do the spec home, maybe, because it's, you can only find and flip so many houses at a time. Whereas if you're doing that, you can like pay for a bigger crew, and all the design can be done at once. And I wonder at what scale does the time thing kind of catch up, would be a curious, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm definitely not there yet. I don't have the crews or the resources to do any of that. So hopefully I can answer that question someday.
Yeah, we both got to get to where we're trying to do 50 flips and spec homes in a couple months and try to see which one takes longer. Make it a reality show.
All right, let's do it. Let's meet back up here in about a year and let each other know how it goes.
Yeah. Oh man. I don't know that this is right when I want to be buying spec homes at all. I mean, I guess it depends on your market, right? So in
Sure, it
Minnesota,
all depends.
I buy my patch of land for $4,000, $5,000, maybe $7,000, $8,000, and the market tanks, and I lose like $2,000 land value.
Yeah,
So that's a little different than you buy an acre in Hawaii for $1 million and the market tanks. So it's a whole different world. So
yeah.
anyway,
Well, that's one thing. That's one reason why we chose Jacksonville as well for the business because if the market does ever tank really bad, then I think we'd be fairly safe because home values out the beach, near the beach, always go back up a little bit quicker than other homes. What we found anyway. So there's something to think about for anybody else that's out there.
yeah, that's true. Yeah, I mean, there's pros and cons to both. I think the spec home world is cool though because you get to, I don't know, that's part of the risk though, right? You got guys who build spec homes and they look like your typical home in the area. You got guys who build spec homes and they're quite extravagant and super, like maybe a super modern design. And there's some really cool ones out there, and you're like, that's really cool, but I really hope the right buyer comes by because otherwise you're stuck with it.
Yep,
So,
absolutely.
yeah.
But we try to watch a lot of HGTV just to make sure that we're doing all the right things.
Yeah,
All the right finishes.
didn't you know that they show everything on that show? You can knock out a whole property in a week.
Instagram is good for that as well.
Yeah, you're right. Like, I'll post this before picture, but I'll do it the week before I post the after picture just so it looks like I was really busy, but I sat on the house for 9 months. But
Yeah.
yeah, or this is the one I went really good on, not the one that took me 7 months and I made $1,000. So I was talking to someone the other day who made like $4,000 on a flip. I was super mad, and I was like, "Well, I mean, at least you still made $4,000." Now I'm like, man, if I only make 4,000 on a flip, I totally understand why they're upset. But it's all perspective.
Yeah.
So what do you think the future looks like?
You bring that up,
Oh,
but
I'm sorry.
sorry, you bring that up, but one thing I forgot to mention is um, it, when I got out and created this business, I think I heard in one of your podcasts. She was an agent. I forget her name, but she said the same thing. She made her first purchase or sale, and she's paying all this money towards these to the agents, right? And so another thing that my wife did is she went out and she got her real estate license, and now she's my realtor, which again helps out a ton because she's making money on the front and it's almost like cash back on a deal, right?
Yeah.
And then again on the back end, she's making another 2.5 to 3%. So that's another huge thing that that she's done for us and for my business as well. So
Yeah, it's a definite bonus to not have to pay your own commission when you're selling. I mean, if you're flipping, you sell quite a few houses in a year, so it adds up quick.
oh yeah, big time.
Yeah. So as I was rudely asking while you were trying to talk, what does the future look like for you guys? Like, what are the plans with this going forward? If you thought that far out.
So one thing that we've tried to do is use our own money, and there are some challenges with that too. But um, so we were able to liquidate all those properties like I told you about before, and come out with a bunch of cash that we can use to build all these homes. The problem with that is growth is a little bit slower, but to answer your question, my plan is to grow, and I would love to do about 20 to 30 homes a year. So that would be probably about 2 homes a month, right? In flips, and that's where I would love to be. And that would allow me to to get a staff, to get a project manager that I could have. That can go out and do some of these things that I do on a daily basis right now. So that would give me the time to do the things that I want to do in life, like travel around with the kids and my wife, and um, and just to have fun, instead of work all the time. But that's about kind of where I'd like to be.
You bring up a really interesting point there, and you said it, and to you it's an easy point, and to a lot of people it makes sense, but a lot of people would never think this way. And that's that you said, I want to scale to 20 or 30 flips a year so that I have more time. And I think that's huge. So I was listening to, I don't know if you know who Bill Allen is. So he's a pretty big, I mean, he runs, I think he just took over House Flipping HQ and seven figure flippers or whatever. So he's a big house flipper. He's a Navy pilot. I can't remember what his aircraft was, but he's a Navy pilot. He's in the reserves right now. And he scaled, I mean, he's doing, I want to say he's like around 200 houses a year or something over the last few years. Yeah. And he just released a podcast. Well, it's a 2-part podcast because they talked forever, but he released a podcast like 3 days ago with his COO, basically talking about how Bill is able to do X number of flips and only work like 3 hours a week, which is just mind-boggling when you think about it. And then you realize, well, yeah, he's got like a staff of 15 people, and he's got a operations officer and a finance officer and contractors and systems. And that's, so I like that you're already thinking that way, because so many people would see, oh man, it took this much work to do a flip. And it took this much more work to do 2 flips. And they forget that once you get to a point where you can hire people, you can pull yourself out of the equation, and it might take half the work to do twice as much, which is just awesome.
4-hour work week, right? That's kind of what it sounds like to me.
People don't.
No, you're absolutely right, and and that's the goal, right? I mean, we all want to be able to retire someday, right? I don't want to work till I'm 90. That would suck, So that's the goal, is just to get to some point where I can do that, or I can have the time to go and travel, and to take my daughters to their little sporting trips, or and do all that stuff with them, so that 20 years down the road, they're not saying, man, dad just worked nonstop, and I don't want to do that. I want to be around and enjoy life. I think that's kind of what everybody wants anyway,
I was going to ask you, because you transitioned from the Air Force into the Air National Guard, and I'm sure some people on the show have heard me mention it, but that's kind of my plan at this point. I'm at 11 years as of Sunday, which is not when you're supposed to get out of the military. You're supposed to just say, I'm here, I'm stuck.
20 years, right? I'm going to retire.
Yeah. And so my contract ends October 10th, 2021. So I will be at 13 years and 2 months, or whatever, some change somewhere in there. And I'm looking at going in the reserves, because really a lot of the same reasons you said. I want time. Like the big one for me is controlling my time as I start to scale and grow everything that I'm doing online, and as well as the real estate. The military is just, not that the military is getting in the way. There's nothing wrong with that. I love the military, but I'm starting to miss opportunities that potentially be very lucrative and very time freeing. So anyway, I would love to hear your thoughts on the transition, and anything that you think would be useful information to someone who may be at that point where they're debating one way or the other in life.
Sure. So, like you said, I'm in the Air National Guard, and I work out at Tyndall Air Force Base. And that decision to me, I'm a part-time guy, drill status guardsman. So I work, I'm the weekend warrior, 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year. But where was I going? So that was a no-brainer for me, because, I'm getting out. There's a ton of uncertainty. I'm starting a brand new business. I'm spending all this money, and I'm not going to see any of it until I, complete this project and, get all that money back. So like I said, no brainer for me. I work, I made a deal with the unit. I really work, basically 4 days every 2 months is when I come out here. And what that gives me is a little bit of security, right? So I'm out here, I get a little bit of income. It's not much, because I'm only working 2 days, right? But I get a little bit of income, and on top of that, I only pay $200 something for that health care, and that to me is worth coming out here for 2 days a month and it's more on my terms. Active duty, it's you were going to do this, you were going to go over here, and you're going to wait. It's very structured, right? But with the National Guard, the reserves the same way. It's much more on your terms. Guys. So you being on active duty, you have to move every 3 or 4 years, right? I assume. I'm not too familiar with the Marines, but
Yeah.
that's how it was for us. Every 3 years we're up and we're gone, we're moving. But it's not uncommon for guys to stay in a guard unit for 15 or 20 years. In fact, I just met a guy. He just came into my unit, but he was with the same unit for 28 years before he came out, and that to me is awesome. It's all about what kind of lifestyle you want to live, of course. But I was getting to the point, where I kind of want my kids to stay at one place so they can kind of grow up in the same school, same friends, all that, and that's about where I was in my life. And so, like I said, it made sense to me to join the National Guard. And the other thing it helps out that could help out is, if the market does tank, or if I totally jack up my business or something like that, I've got a backup plan. I can always come to the unit and say, hey, let me pick up some orders for 2 or 3 months, while things are going bad back home or something, and that way I'm getting paid still, and it's a great job. And it really helps out. It really helped me out, and I love it. And just to have that in my hip pocket, it just makes me really, really comfortable that I've done it. So.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. The healthcare, the security, the fact that, and I haven't decided yet fully if I'm going to do Marine Corps reserves or look into one of the other reserve services. I love the Marine Corps, so there's a huge pride piece there, but then there's other options for, I could be a helicopter pilot in the Army without going to OCS. They do the warrant officer pilot. That could be fun. So anyway, the options are all out there. But I did some math the other day, and aside from the healthcare, which is huge, depending on how high up the chart you make it, it's really not much of a difference in pension if you drop out of active duty at like 10 to 15 years. For me, if I get promoted 2, maybe 3 more times, I can only get promoted 3 more times unless I commission. I was looking at $500 to $800 a month less, which is not that significant. Now, granted, I don't see my pension for 20 years later, so that's the significant piece. But, if you plan on working till you're 55 or 60 anyway, not getting your pension till you're 59 and a half or 60, depending on deployments, is not that big a deal. So anyway, I don't know. I realized, like, I had no idea until I started looking into reservists and pension stuff that, like, oh, it's actually still a pretty good deal.
No, you're absolutely right. And you hit the nail on the head there too, that you don't get it until you're 62 or 63 or something. But there are options in the reserves and the Guard if you are if you're a full-time dude, then you can then you're still getting time towards an active duty retirement. And there are a bunch of guys in my unit that do that. That they come in as a drill status guardsman, and they throw their name out there to get themselves known a little bit. Let the commanders know who they are, so that when a full-time job does open up, and if that's what you want to do, that you can put yourself in for that position. Once you're in that position, then you're getting time back towards that normal active duty retirement, which is pretty sweet.
Yeah, that's actually really cool. So if you did that and you ended up being active status, so even if you're a reservist by trade and you get activated enough to hit the full 20 years, does it become an active duty pension, or is it still the 60-year?
So if you'd have to make up that time you missed, right? And so if you say you missed like 2 years in the middle, you'd have to add that 2 years on as a full-time reservist.
That's
AGR, Active Guard Reserve is what it's called, but you're still getting time towards that normal retirement. As soon as you hit that 20 or whenever you decide to say uncle and quit, then you'd be getting that retirement.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, I didn't even think about that. So one of the reasons I looked at or I like the idea of the Marine Reserves, is that I was a recruiter, and the way that our recruiting works, they're always interested in, we call them EAD, extended active duty, and they'll take reservists and put them on recruiting duty for, it's not 2-year orders. It's, hey, you're on recruiting duty, and if you are successful, we'll make you a career recruiter and you'll go full active duty until retirement. And if you're not successful, then you can just basically turn in a 2-week back into the reserves. And I've seen both sides of the spectrum. And so that's kind of like if I do the reserves and then I'm like, oh man, I really do miss this crap, and this was a mistake, there's an option, although I'd really prefer to just burn the ships and go for it. So I'm going to not tell myself there's an option at first.
Well, you know what? The military's hurting right now. There are manning shortfalls all over the place. So if you were to go to the reserves or the Guard, there are plenty of opportunities out there for you to go back if you needed to. There are routes available for you to do that.
You mean the world providing medication as solutions for everything and legalizing marijuana is hurting recruiting? What? No, anyway, sorry, we're not going to get into all that. There's some crazy stuff that I saw in recruiting, and it's only getting better as rules are getting crazier. Man, it's weird. Well,
it was a Guard job in Colorado, please.
Yeah, well, that's what's crazy about it, is all those rules still apply, right, for DoD.
Yeah.
Like, eventually, the military is either going to have to bend its rules, because what happens once it's federally legalized, right? They can't just say, oh, you're not allowed to smoke pot in the military. Well, maybe they can, but they can't say you're not allowed to have ever smoked pot before, or you require a drug waiver, because it's totally legal. So that's kind of a weird spot some of my buddies are in with recruiting right now, is like, well, we're not allowed to, like, these are all still drug waivers, but they're not doing anything illegal. So anyway, but yeah, it's a weird spot. We'll have to see. The military's going to have to adapt a little bit on some of that stuff, I think, as it becomes more provident. So,
sure.
I don't think that was the right word, but you know what I mean. Common. There we go. We'll use a simple word. Common. There we go. Bringing the Marine out. All right. So let's, I got a couple questions here that I always like to ask. And I know it's much later for you than it is for me, but it's got to be getting past both of our bedtimes. I'm getting old. So if an E1, E2, an 18, 19-year-old, for those of you who somehow are listening to a military podcast and don't know what an E1, E2 is, walked up to you asking for advice, you only had a few minutes to give it to them, what do you think you'd tell
them? So you said one thing, but I have two, and then they kind of piggyback off each other. But the first thing, well, let me think here.
No.
The first thing, don't be afraid to take risks. All right. That doesn't mean to do whatever you want. It means to go out there, do some research, and to actually put your foot out there and do what you want to do. The second thing is to don't ever get too comfortable. And that's a quote that one of my old bosses told me a long time ago. And to be honest, it took me a few years to even know what he was talking about. I'm like, what do you want? What do you mean not get comfortable? Isn't that the goal? We want to get comfortable, right? But he said, don't get too comfortable. And so I'm reading a book right now. You've probably heard of it. It's called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a.
Yep, it's on my shelf up there somewhere. Big orange book.
It's super cool. I'm listening to it actually. I cheat.
Yeah.
But
I listen to Audible mostly.
But it's fun. It's a fun read. The author did pretty well with that book. But we got to this part, and he calls it he calls it Manson's Law of Avoidance. I don't know if you remember that from that part of the book, but he says the more something threatens your identity, the more you will avoid it. And that to me kind of goes hand in hand with that don't ever get too comfortable piece. So basically what he's saying is, if you're comfortable, if you're living comfortable, you're not putting yourself out there. You're not taking the risks. You're not making yourself better. You might not be making yourself any worse either, but you're not learning anything. And so don't ever get too comfortable, to me, means you got to keep doing stuff that's out of your comfort zone, so that you can learn, so that you so that you can succeed and so that you can fail. Failure is a huge part of what we do as human beings. We go out there, we try stuff, we fail. If it doesn't work, we learn from it and we move on. So that's basically what I would tell them. Don't get too comfortable.
No, I like it. That's good. It's good, and it's different than, some people say the same thing and then no, I'm just kidding. No, that's good though. It's very true because complacency kills, as we say in the military. So, all right. So what is a resource, book, course, website, whatever that you would recommend to anybody looking to get started in real estate?
So I looked at that question, and if they're just getting started, I've listened to a couple of your podcasts, and one book that comes up. You're smiling.
The purple one behind me.
Probably Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Yeah.
So I read that a few years ago, and as I'm reading that was my epiphany. Where I'm reading it, and I'm going, man, this is exactly what I'm doing with my properties right now without even knowing it. And so that book doesn't get into very many specifics, as you know. I mean, he's got a whole plethora of books out there, but that's the one that got me started. That's the one that got me excited about what I'm doing and about basically how he talks about retiring, right? So he says to, it's been many years since I read this, but getting that income in, what's the word I'm looking for?
Residual? Passive.
Yeah, thank you.
Something like that.
Passive income. Yeah, getting that passive income so that you can go and live your life and do whatever you want to do with it. So anyway, that's the book that got me started in this whole process.
Yeah, that's a good one. All right. But now I'm going to ask you if you got any books that you would recommend that aren't specific to real estate, because I don't do that enough. And there's some good ones out there.
To be honest, all the books I'm reading right now are like code books.
Oh yeah?
I don't think anybody wants to read those.
like HTML, like coding type stuff, or
no, like Florida building code.
Oh yeah, that's not
stuff like that. And
nobody wants to learn about RA zone, whatever, for this to that. Actually, but that's really cool though, as you do spec stuff, because there's some huge opportunities in land, and we don't need to dig too deep into that. But I mean, there's some opportunities where you can just flip the zoning and make a killing.
Oh yeah, for sure. And
not that it's as easy as flipping the zoning.
It's not. I mean, there's some deals out there where you need, a bunch of lawyers, and you just start spending some money, but the dividends are there. But you're absolutely right. You can definitely get creative with some of these things. I mean, the city wants to help you out. Cities and counties, they want to do just what you want to do. They want to make the neighborhoods look nice. They want to make the buildings look nice. They're there to help you out. And so if you go into the county and you've got an idea, as long as it's all legal, they're more than likely going to help you out.
Yeah.
So
I agree completely. All right. So before we wrap this up, is there anything you'd like to add? Any parting advice or big ideas?
One thing I was thinking about with this one was when I was separating from active duty, there's a mandatory. I think it's mandated by law, but you have to go through this. It's like a boots to business or something like that program, and there's parts of it where you build a resume, you start a LinkedIn profile, and then there's a part of it where it takes your MOS or your AFSC, and it translates it into the civilian world, right? And as I'm going through this, mine was easy, airline pilot. That's it. Okay, that's all I get to do.
That's okay. I'm good for driving a truck, so.
But there was one kid next to me, and to be honest, I don't know I can't remember what his job was, but his biggest gripe was there was nothing that his job translated to. Like, I'm looking at him like, dude, we are managers of people. We are managers of equipment. We were super disciplined. We took a job that we learned over just the course of a few months, and we became experts at it. You add a budget along with that, and you're a project manager for something, And so that's my big thing is it might not feel like it, and it might not sound like you're learning much in the military, but you are. That discipline that you're learning, that can translate to a ton of things on the outside world. And to be honest, all these outside agencies and businesses, they love that. And so don't get bogged down if you think that it's not gonna, whatever you're doing is not translating. It will. You just got to stay positive and want to learn how to do whatever you want to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's funny because, like, for example, one of my good friends he was a recruiter with me, which probably helps with this, but I mean, he was a infantry guy, which you talk about skills not really translating very well unless you want to get into security, law enforcement.
Sure.
And he's like head of HR for Lowe's, and he's doing very well for himself. Now, part of that's recruiting, but I mean, the other part of that is the leadership that comes with being on the front lines. And yeah, people just forget. They focus on the tangible, which is great and all, but that's ultimately, you can learn tangible. It's the intangibles that really benefit you in the long run.
That's a great way of saying it. That's awesome. And you're absolutely right.
At least I'm hoping I'm right, because otherwise I'm going to drive my truck.
It's just you and me here.
I say all that. I could translate to logistics and stuff. I've been high enough up on the logistics realm now that I could get a good job, but I don't want to do that. So
yeah,
I'll get fat and have my 70-ounce big cola cup in one hand and doing the arm wrestling in the other hand, the old Rambo movie.
Turn the hat around like that.
Go, and then you got to go over the top with the hand. I don't know. Whatever movie that was, Sylvester Stallone. That'll be me. Be all buff and known for Rambo, but arm wrestling. All right. So, hey, Nick, if people wanted to reach out, where's a good place for people to get a hold of you?
So I'm on Instagram. We just started that. Really, it's Coastal Flip is us, my wife and I, and anybody out there, if they have any questions on anything that I've talked about, you can email me direct at 904eagle@gmail.com.
Make sure I didn't mess that up. 904 Eagle.
904eagle@gmail.com.
Awesome. Sounds good. Well, Nick, I really appreciate you joining me on this show. It was a lot of fun. I learned a little bit about spec-homes. I knew what they were, but I hadn't really thought about some of the struggles that you come into as you're building it's just such a different world than what I've been doing for investments. So it's cool to hear a little bit about that from someone who's actually done it rather than people who just heard what spec-homes were and ran the other way.
Yeah. No, I'm glad I can come out. Man, thanks so much for having me too. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
The first one.
Oh, pop the cherry. No.
Yeah.
I think that's a cool thing about the niche, right? So a lot of service member guys, we're not there. As you get into the podcast realm, there are some guys they're like podcast junkies. They just hop around, which is great. I mean, it's good marketing. It's a good strategy. You get to talk to a lot of people. But I have had a lot of service members and veterans that I get to be the first person to ever talk to them on a podcast, which is fun because it's like, hey, no one's ever heard your story through a radio show in essence, which is just, it's a cool theory. Because I remember my first one and it was, I was nervous, but it's been a good time. So I've started to enjoy doing this. So I really appreciate you joining us.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Thanks so much, Dave.
We're talking us when it's just me over here, but they know what I mean.
Yeah.
Have a great night.
Yeah, you too, man.
Thank you for listening to another episode about my journey from military to millionaire. If you liked it, be sure to visit FromMilitaryToMillionaire.com/podcast to subscribe to future podcasts. While you're there, we'd love for you to rate the show, give us a review on iTunes. Now get out there and take action.